In this video, we take a look at the Azure App Service consisting of web apps, logic apps, mobile apps, API apps, and function apps. And we focus on web apps and how they work together with the app service. We create a web app and publish it to Azure, and we also look at the options of pre-built web apps offered by Azure. So this video will be comprehensive over the concepts and the theory behind the app services and app service plans. So before we talk about web apps, let's talk about app service and the app service plans. The app service is a service that hosts one of the 5 kinds of applications that Microsoft provides. They could be web apps, they could be mobile apps, they could be logic apps, they could be API apps, and they could be function apps. So each app runs in its own app service, and when you look in the Azure portal to see your website, you will look for the app service in which it is running. It conveniently has the same name as the app it's hosting. But the question is, what is an app service plan? So an app service plan defines the capacity and resources to be shared among one or more app services that are assigned to that plan. The following are some of the criteria you can define when you're creating an app service plan. The location, such as West US or East US and so on. Instance count, which basically is about how many instances of that app service you want to have. The pricing tier, such as free, standard, or premium, providing distinct settings for a variety of performance and service capabilities, such as number of cores or instance size, amount of memory, amount of storage, maximum number of instances, and auto-scaling options depending on the tier could be automatic, manual, or basically none. So when you deploy your app service for the first time, you specify which app service plan you want to use. At deployment time, you can select an app service plan you have created or create a new app service plan. So basically, how does the entire thing helping you is through being more cost effective and being easier to manage. With infrastructure as a service, you can create your own virtual machines, deploy your apps to those virtual machines, and deal with the IIS setup and application pools and so on. Then every time you change an app, you have to deploy it to all the VMs again. If you scale it out and you have 4 VMs or 8 VMs, it just becomes more onerous. With an IIS, you basically yourself are responsible for the continuing management of your service. Using app services or using any of those plans, basically you're enabled to run multiple applications on one set of VMs, even if each of the application is deployed separately. For example, it is very easy to add 5 or 6 websites. Let's say you have 5 websites and 3 mobile apps that you want to host. You could run each one on its own VM, which would require 8 VMs, sum of 5 and 3. If you want redundancy, which is recommended, that would require 16 VMs, another 8 for redundancy. So even if you select small instances, the cost adds up really quickly. Plus, you have to scale each set of VMs separately. If you could run those 8 applications on the same set of 2 VMs, it would be more cost effective and easier to manage. This is what using app service plans does for you. And you set up one app service plan with a specific VM size, number of instances, and etc. Then you deploy the 8 applications specifying the same app service plan for each one. This results in all 8 applications running on that same set of 2 VMs. You can deploy and update each application as needed, so you don't have to update them all at the same time. When you create your app service plan, The resources you requested are allocated for you. When you deploy an app to that app service plan, it simply deploys the applications to those allocated resources. So basically, as you can see, it is very, very effective. So if you decide you want to have 4 VMs instead of 2 in our example, you simply go to the Azure portal and modify the app service plan, changing the number of instances from 2 to 4. It will create 2 more VMs and deploy your apps to them for you. If you're using small VMs and want to scale up to medium VMs, you can simply modify the pricing tier in the app service plan and it will scale up. With web apps running in an app service using an app service plan, the management is handled for you and you can easily scale up and out just by changing the setting of the app service plan. And that's all what you have to do, which makes it extremely easy to manage and extremely cost effective. Now let's quickly talk about some good features that app services bring to you. Starting with multiple languages and frameworks. So app services have first-class support for ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node, PHP, or Python. You can also run PowerShell and other scripts or executables as background services when it comes to the app services. There is the DevOps optimization for you, so you can set up continuous integration and deployment with Azure DevOps, GitHub, Bitbucket, Docker Hub, or Azure Container Registry. You can promote updates through test and staging environments, manage your apps in app service by using Azure PowerShell, or the cross-platform command line interface as we discussed in the previous videos. You also get the global scale with high availability. This means you can scale up or out manually or automatically based on how you choose so. Host your apps anywhere in Microsoft's global data center infrastructure, and the app service level agreement promises high availability to you. Think about the amount of burden and overhead which is going to be removed from your shoulder when you're using Microsoft Web Apps in order to run a mobile app compared to running your own virtual machines with all those hassles of load balancing, data centers, and all that. So connections to SaaS platforms and on-premises data. You can choose from more than 50 connectors for enterprise systems such as SAP, SaaS service, which is a software as a service, such as Salesforce, and internet services such as Facebook. Access on-premises data using hybrid connections and Azure virtual machine networks. Next is security and compliance. App services and ISO SOC and PCI compliant. That means all the banking transactions, everything in the financial sector now can be handled by the app services and meet the compliance requirements. Authenticate users with Azure Active Directory or with social logins such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, and create IP address restrictions and manage service identities are those features that are provided and available to you when you use the Microsoft web services, web app services, and it enables you to run your business better than before. Application templates. You can choose from an extensive list of application templates in the Azure Marketplace, such as WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal. And right now, these are flying so high based on the resources that we have recently seen in the market trend. There is Visual Studio integration. Visual Studio has dedicated tools which actually can streamline the work of creating, deploying, and debugging, and your developers are going to deal with those in a very seamless fashion without even noticing that they're working with the web services while they're sitting at their computer running the Visual Studio. API and mobile features are also another advantage of using this service. So the app service provides turnkey CRS support for RESTful API scenarios and simplifies mobile app scenarios by enabling authentication, offline data sync, push notifications, and more services running in the back office. You can have serverless code, which means you can run a code snippet or a script on demand without having to explicitly provision or manage the infrastructure which is running the code, and pay only for the compute time your code actually uses. For more information on this, you have to look at the Azure function. But just for a second, think about the convenience that this brings to the table. You have your code snippet, you have your transcript that actually you don't need to care about how you're running it, you simply run it. So, web apps. Now at this point, let's talk about web apps. Now that you understand app services and app service plans, I'll show you what a web app is. Discuss some of its features and then talk about the various options you have for creating one. Then I'll show you how to use a couple of those options to create and deploy a web app. A web app is a web application that is hosted in an app service. The app service is the managed service in Azure that enables you to deploy a web application and make it available to your customers on the internet in a very short amount of time. As noted, you don't directly support the VMs on which your web app runs. They are managed for you. In fact, you don't have access to those underlying VMs at all. Supported languages include .NET, Java, PHP, Node, ASP Core, Ruby, and Python. In addition to creating your own web apps, there are several web applications available to use as a starting point, such as WordPress, Umbraco, Joomla, and Drupal. You can use continuous deployment with Team Foundation Server or TFS, GitHub, TeamCity, Jenkins, or Bitbucket so that every time you commit a change, a new version of the web app is actually deployed. At this point, the question would be, how about the scaling the web apps? Scaling is done by scaling the app service plan to which the web app belongs to. You can scale the number of instances in and out on demand. You can configure outscaling so Azure will scale it in or out for you depending on specific performance measures such as CPU percentage. You can also publish your website to multiple locations and use the Azure Traffic Manager to handle the routing of the traffic to the location nearest to your customer. For diagnostics, which basically is the next important matter, you can gather performance statistics, application logging, web server logging, IIS logs, and IIS failed request logs. If you're using Microsoft Visual Studio, you can even remotely debug your application while it is running in the cloud. In short, there are many features available when using web apps to make it easy for you to deploy, manage, and troubleshoot a web applications. So now that you understand web apps, let's see what are the options for creating web apps. There are multiple options for creating a web app and deploying the content to app service. Let's look at a few of those, including these. Azure Marketplace. This contains all of the resources you can deploy in Azure. and I'll show you how you can use this to create web apps from pre-existing templates such as WordPress. You have the Visual Studio Code, which is a free open source cross-platform code editor with debugging capabilities, or you can use Visual Studio as the full-fledged development IDE of Microsoft's. There are many pre-created websites and templates in the Azure Marketplace that you can use. To see all of those options available, you can log into the Azure portal and click New, Web plus Mobile, and see all. Basically, this is going to show you all the available web apps or mobile apps in the Microsoft. Remember, when you get to that page, you have to scroll down all the way to get to the web apps, which is including web app plus SQL, web app plus MySQL, WordPress, and Umbraco CMS. Or look at blogs plus CMSs, which are basically Joomla, Drupal, DNN, Orchard CMS, Umbraco CMS, and MonoX. Or you can go to the starter web apps and look at ASP.NET, HTML5, Node, PHP, Apache Tomcat, and some examples like the Bakery web app and the Java Coffee Shop web app. But most important and most powerful of all of these is the Visual Studio. Visual Studio comes in two different flavors to you: Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Full-Fledged Enterprise. Visual Studio Code, or VS Code, is a free open source code editor with support for development operations such as debugging, task running, and creating packages, version control, and so on. It runs on Windows, OS X, and Linux. VS Code makes debugging easier, providing IntelliSense code completion and easy code refactoring. It integrates with Git and also package managers, repositories, and various build tools. VS Code has built-in support for Node, JavaScript, and TypeScript. Using extensions, you can use VS Code to debug languages such as C#, C++, Python, Ruby, and PowerShell. There's also tooling for web technologies such as HTML, CSS, and JSON, and also the Markdown.